What's up, you guys, and welcome to the studio. Today, we have none other than our worship leader here at the student ministry here on with us, and I'm super excited. He's talking about some things that really hit close to home. So welcome to the studio, Byron.
Hey, what's up? Yeah, thanks for having me, Kai.
Of course.
I'm super excited.
How are you doing?
I'm good. I'm getting ready to go back into school. So it's just kind of wrapping up the season of rest and of summer vibes. And now it's back to fall and school vibes.
What are you studying at school again?
I am in school for mechanical engineering, officially, fingers crossed, graduating in December, which is crazy to say and even record that I'm almost done. So it's crazy.
Wow. Okay. Well, congratulations on almost graduating, I guess. But how did you get started from engineering to student ministry?
I like to say that it was by accident. I have always dreamt of being an engineer ever since I was a little kid. I grew up watching movies kind of like Iron Man and Transformers and so many mechanical and technological things that just always sparked my creativity and my just desire to learn and know more. And even till this day, a lot of what I do, even in our student ministry, is very tech related. And so I think I've always had that engineering mindset. And my family, I also come from a family of engineers, and so that always kind of led me towards the engineering path. I did robotics in school, and so I always loved it. And as far as worship goes, my very first instrument, was the cello. I did it in school for a couple of years, and I almost didn't pick up the guitar because of it. So they're in probably some parallel universe. There's probably a Byron that became a cellist rather than like a guitarist, which is really funny and crazy to say. But I love the cello, and I did orchestra. And my previous church was doing a summer camp where they were basically giving music lessons over the summer. And I didn't want to do it. I was like, I love the cello. Why would I ever do anything different? And my parents convinced me. They encouraged me. They said, hey, just try it out. Do something different. And so I picked up the guitar during that entire summer, and then I fell in love with it. And immediately I knew in my heart that worship was something I was being called to, and I wanted to immediately begin jumping into serving. And so I began serving as a musician and as a guitarist ever since then. And fast forward to then moving and coming here to Sugar Creek. I began serving across our church, and it's been predominantly in our Spanish ministries where I grew up in, but student ministry I've always been super involved in, playing around the different campuses as well. But I always thought and felt that my calling into worship was as a musician rather than anything different. And even upon being blessed with the opportunity to come on staff with our student ministry, I began kind of as our worship director and just kind of helping coordinate things behind the scenes as a musician. And through that process, this is why I like to say I stumbled upon worship accidentally, is because A, I never ever saw myself being in a position like this. And B, like I said, I always thought my calling into worship was as a musician rather than a worship leader. But being in this role opened my eyes to seeing that worship oftentimes looks a lot like obedience. It looks a lot like surrender. And in my particular walk with the Lord, in my particular calling as a worship leader, it meant that I needed to surrender to something that was outside of my comfort zone. And in this case, it was worship leading, it was singing, and it was worship pastoring, rather than hiding just behind my strengths of just being behind my instrument. Although I don't consider myself a singer, it was something I stepped out of my comfort zone to do because I ultimately felt like it was something that the Lord was calling me to do in the season that I'm in. And it's something that I have grown to love and have an incredibly deep passion for, even though whenever I was a kid, I used to say I hated singing and that I was never going to do it. And so the Lord's changed my heart, molded my heart, changed my desires in so many incredible ways. And now I find myself here and blessed to be able to worship across our church and with our students week in and week out.
That's incredible. You're literally so multifaceted, Byron. Like, I don't think you understand the fact that like you can literally do anything and you're like Superman in the offices. So
except the whistle. I can't whistle.
I can't whistle either. Well, I wanted to ask you specifically because I know you said like you never started with singing. You never imagined yourself singing. Was there someone in your life that specifically encouraged you like, Byron, I think if you put the work into it, you could sing?
Yes and no. There never really was anybody because, again, I think I never ever saw myself in that position, so I never exposed myself to those kinds of things. I would never sing. I never really kind of jumped out and kind of did anything of that sort. I always, again, like I said, whenever I was a kid, I used to say I hated it and that I was never going to do it.
Yeah.
And so when given the opportunities to do choir and stuff like that, I used to be like, no, that's not for me. I want to do my guitar. I want to
Mhm.
do instruments. I want to do music and stuff. And so I never did it. But I guess really that desire really came from being, I think, inside of our student ministry
Mhm.
and just realizing the fact that I felt like I was doing a bad job as a worship director or worship
Mm.
leader if I wasn't actually helping point our students and point our church to what worship actually is and where the lyrics are found from and where and what's the higher purpose of worship, you know? And so I realized I was doing a poor job at that, and I realized that the calling for me was to step outside of my comfort zone so that I could help lead our students better. And in that season 2, we didn't really have a worship leader either. And so there was a major gap in our student ministry. And I realized that I just needed to step outside of my comfort zone and do it, even though I didn't necessarily feel called. I did feel called, but I guess I didn't feel equipped to do it.
Mm.
So
How did you find that the Lord was equipping you during that season of your life for the worship leading?
honestly, it took a lot of getting over my self doubt and my fears.
Mm.
One of the things I have always struggled with is this kind of perfectionistic mindset
Yeah.
of feeling like I need to not only just be perfect, but I need to in some way be enough for others.
Mm.
Feeling like I need to perform well, feeling like I always need to deliver, feeling like I always need to overachieve so that I can be liked by people or so
Yeah.
that I can feel like I'm doing a good job. And sometimes a lot of that comes from honestly me imposing those kind of expectations on myself, even though I don't need to. And it's something that I've had to figure out and just something that I've had to step away from and just learn and let the Lord kind of fill in that gap.
Mhm.
It just took a lot of me getting over my own fears and my own self doubts and realize that if the Lord was the one calling me into the season of obedience and into the season of surrender or the season of worship, that even though I didn't feel like I was called or didn't feel like I was ready, that he was going to equip me through the process because that is what he promises to do. So,
Yeah. I know a specific scripture that speaks to my mind for when you're saying obedience is Deuteronomy 5:33. Walk in obedience to the Lord your God and all that he commands you to, so that you may live, prosper, and prolong your days in the land that he's given unto you.
yeah, it's so good.
Is there a scripture though that speaks to you when it talks about surrendering all of these fears and this perfectionistic identity that you find yourself being encaptured by?
I mean, there's so many.
Mm.
It's so hard to choose. I don't think there's one particularly about obedience that comes to mind, but one of my favorite scriptures, and that also kind of helped me kind of reach, I guess, to the decision that I made of starting to worship lead rather than just being a worship musician was
Mhm.
firstly, I think everything stemmed from understanding really what worship actually is.
Yeah.
And the two scriptures that stick out to me, the first one is John, it's in John 4 when Jesus is talking to a woman and he says, "Woman, believe me, the hour is coming when neither on this mountain nor in Jerusalem will you worship the Father. But the hour is coming and is now here when the true worshiper will worship the Father in spirit and truth. For the Father is seeking such people to worship him." That idea of worshiping the Father in spirit and truth, the spirit, I think it speaks to this idea that we need to have a wholehearted passion for God,
Mm.
while in truth challenges us that to worship the Creator, we also need to have a knowledge and an understanding of the God we are worshiping, and that both are necessary for biblical worship.
Mm.
And so being blessed to be in the role that I'm in as worship leader, and as is the vision of our pastoral leadership and everybody here, is my heart is to be able to cultivate a student ministry that has a wholehearted passion for God. And I
Mm.
think a lot of that it stems from understanding who God is and the God that we're worshiping. And so whenever I was figuring out what my call as a worshiper looked like, I realized that I needed to do a better job at surrendering. And if I wholeheartedly admire and surrender to God, then why would I doubt his calling?
Yeah, for sure. How did you even get your start here in student ministry?
So I came to Sugar Creek whenever I was in the ninth grade.
Mhm.
And I knew that I wanted to serve and worship. And so I immediately, one of the first people I ever talked to in our student ministry, surprisingly, was Miss Sharon.
I love Miss Sharon.
She was actually, I think, if not the very first person I ever met in student ministry.
Wow.
And she was a big person who helped me get connected in student ministry. I love Miss Sharon to death. She's the best. And so she was a big person I got connected with. And I was even a part of these kind of prayer circles she would lead on Sunday mornings while I was a student. And she helped me get connected. She connected me at that time with the pastor on staff. And then later on, Pastor Abe came on staff as well. And he was actually my student pastor as well, which a lot of people don't know. But Miss Sharon was a big part in helping me get connected in the student ministry. And I mean, since then, I've just been able to just, be plugged in here into the worship that we do here. And yeah.
So I don't know if you remember this or not, but when I first started in the lab at the Richmond Rosenberg campus, this was right after COVID. And I had to do my worship interview with you or what?
Worship
you and
audition?
Bailey.
Yeah.
Yes, worship audition. It felt like an interview because it was over Zoom. And so it was the weirdest thing I've ever done before. I was just standing in my room.
COVID was a weird time.
It was so weird. Was that like your first year though? Like,
yeah.
That is crazy. I would have never guessed. Like, I was walking in there like thinking, oh my gosh, I'm so nervous. Like, this dude knows everything there is to know about worship. And I'm just like fresh into high school. Like, I've done choir since fourth grade kind of thing.
For context, what was probably going through my head is I have no idea what I'm doing. So,
well, what I really appreciated though was when I logged in, your personality really showed through because of the fact the first thing you said was, "Hey, I'm so excited for today, but I have a question. Do you like wings?" And I was
sounds right. That sounds totally like me.
It's so funny though, because like I would have never guessed.
Chicken wings are one of my favorite food, like legitimately.
From Wingstop though, right?
Wingstop's up there, Pluckers is up there, but honestly, any kind of wings, I'm game. I'm there.
Okay, for those of you guys that don't know, Byron is like, he's a food guru. Like, he knows the best restaurants to go to. Like, if you ever have like, literally, he has like the top tier. It's like, you got a budget you got to stick to. Let him know. Like, he'll give you categories, options. Do you think that's like part of your perfectionistic?
I should just start charging, I should just start being like, hey, you wanted a recommendation. It's what kind of recommendation you want? A tier, B tier recommendation? That's going to be $5, $10 range.
That would be so funny. I would actually probably.
No, something I came across recently was that both Google Maps and Apple Maps allow you to create almost like playlists. So you can kind of save like all of the restaurants and locations and stuff that you like and kind of have a playlist dedicated to that. So then that way, when people ask now, I can just share my playlist of restaurants and they will be able to see it on their maps.
See, the only playlist I would have on there is Chick-fil-A, Smoothie King, and Dairy Queen. That's about it. I'm not very cultured when it comes to that. But would you say that's like your like perfectionistic tendencies? Like that helps like fuel into like you being able to release who you are as a perfectionist? You want to find the best restaurants? Like
there are little things about my personality like that I think were some of that mindset of being enough or wanting to have the perfect option selected or the perfect plan made and stuff like that. Where in terms of food, that's where, that's one of the many ways that I think it comes through.
In your perfectionistic tendencies, how do you not let the enemy creep in to where you can have some things that are positive, but also have some negative things that you need to set a boundary up for?
First of all, I think it's hard. I think that idea of self-identity and sometimes being tied to your actions is a difficult water to navigate. And I think it's something that a lot of people struggle with. For me, school actually shaped a lot of my, it weirdly helped me and also didn't help me. There was a season where I really struggled and there was a season where that once I kind of figured it out, I started to step away from that mindset a lot. As I mentioned, I'm blessed to, go to school for mechanical engineering. And I'm also blessed that I pretty much I have a full scholarship where I really don't pay for anything, which is a blessing. But that also comes with a lot of requirements for GPAs and for hours and for this and that. And so a lot of minute little details that I always have to keep track of. Where in the beginning of my school, it made me sometimes over focus on that and want to, oh, okay, I need to have this perfect GPA, because if not, I'm going to lose everything, and I'm going to have to pay all this money and this and that. And so I struggled a lot with that, because I was like, oh, okay, I need to overperform in this area. And then going down school and kind of also balancing the being at church as well, and having a lot of people in my life help me realize that it's okay to make mistakes, that it's okay to not be perfect. It's okay to just be yourself, and just realize that it's totally okay to be in a season of learning and a season of making mistakes, and that those mistakes are necessary in order for you to keep growing and to continue getting better at things, and that quite literally without them, we would just be stuck in the same place forever. There would be no growth. Yeah. And so coming to that mindset and being in a place and surrounded by so many people that were so forgiving, that often encourage me both verbally, just letting me know that, hey, you're doing a good job, that, hey, it's okay that, you messed this up. It's okay that, hey, how are we going to fix it next time? And all those things that inevitably led me to realize that, I wasn't defined by my actions, that I was enough regardless of what I did, and that no matter what I did in the world, as long as my heart was to follow God, to obey Him, to surrender to Him, that he was always going to love me, and I was always going to be enough in God's eyes. And so I say all of that to say that it took school, it took being a part of worship here, all of those little things ultimately led me to step outside of the mentality that I grew up with, of needing my actions to be enough, to just realize that I was enough in the Lord's eyes. And yeah.
You hit a little bit on the idea of forgiveness, and specifically saying the affirmation from others reminding you like you are forgiven. How did you find forgiveness from the Lord to forgive yourself for those imperfections within you?
It starts with realizing that I'm fearfully and wonderfully made. I'm made in God's image. And I mean, the Lord doesn't make mistakes.
Yeah.
That also means that even my quirks and my little things are also gifts from the Lord, and abilities for me to also perhaps learn from them. In a funny way, if we were all perfect, we would all just literally be in heaven.
Yeah.
And so there would be no growth. There would be no ability to rely on the Lord. There would be no need for that, because we would just be perfect. And so the fact that I'm not perfect means that I have more space to grow, and more space to rely on the Lord more, and more space to lean on Him, and for Him to be the one who gets the glory through my growth. And so just coming to that realization, I think is huge.
Yeah, for sure. Last night I was reading through you're going to laugh. I was reading through Revelations in the middle of a sermon.
Of course.
Of course, I was reading through Revelations. But there was specifically something that stuck out to me in one of the passages. I think it was chapter 5 that I was reading through. And it said how the multitude came through the throne room, and they came before the Lord, washed in the blood of the Lamb, wearing white robes. And I was just thinking of the fact, like, we often think that we're going to be covered in the blood of the Lamb and we're still going to be imperfect. But that's not true, in the sense that He covers our sins. He covers us in the fact that He is our God. He's fearfully and wonderfully made us, as you said. What would you say is the best scripture that's helped you to remind you that, one, you're fearfully and wonderfully made, but two, you've been washed by the blood of the Lamb and made anew?
Ooh. A big one that I was reminded of was Ephesians 4:32, and that is, be kind and compassionate to one another, forgiving each other, just as Christ God forgave you. And so, if Christ forgave me, and he's also called us to forgive others. We also need to just have grace and be able to just forgive ourselves in that process too.
Well, Byron, I really appreciate all that you've shared with us today. I loved having you on, and obviously the fact that you basically were the one who started this entire podcast, because I am obviously not the tech brains. You're the tech brains. And then with Jamie's help with all the logistics and everything, I literally couldn't have done anything without you guys. So I'm really appreciative of you and the fact that you took the time to be here today, because I know we've had to reschedule it so many times. You were supposed to be on season 1, which didn't work out, but that's probably for the best, because now we're at season 2 and they're like, wow, Byron's so awesome. I want to be in tech and worship now.
Who's the bald guy? What the?
Is that Caillou? No, that's what Reagan calls you, isn't it?
I've gotten it all. I've gotten Caillou. I've gotten Mr. Clean. I've gotten what's the guy from Snoopy? Linus? No.
Linus?
No. What's the guy from Snoopy? Charlie Brown.
Oh.
Charlie Brown. I've gotten Gru a lot because I wear black a lot. So then people are like, "Oh, Gru." I told them I'll do it for any dress up party if everybody else dresses up as minions. So
I could see that all your tech people just be minions and you be Gru for the night. That'd be kind of fire. Well, okay. So the last question that we kind of ask everybody here on the podcast is, what is your biggest yay God moment? Whether that be something that happened today, something that happened last week, maybe it's your testimony. What would you say is the biggest yay God moment, Byron?
I think my biggest yay God moment was making the decision to stay here in Houston for school. Before making that decision, I had submitted at least maybe 30 college applications, or actually even flashback even more. The summer before my senior year, I got the privilege and blessing of being able to go on mission to Japan. And it was an experience that completely challenged my faith, and it completely opened my eyes to see the Lord in a brand new light. It instilled just passion to be able to share the gospel with the people and the nations and the world. And that also is attached to, honestly, my calling as a worshiper, because if worship is God's ultimate vision and call for all of us, if his vision is for all the people, tribes, and tongues to worship him for all eternity, then, and us having an understanding of who our God is, then as a result, that should also be fueling our drive to bring the gospel and bring God to the nations. Yeah. And so that mission trip really changed my life, and it made me realize that I needed to fully surrender to God's plans. And that meant in that season, surrender my school decision to him. And so with that, I said to myself afterwards, okay, well, Lord, I'm just gonna cast that net and just kind of see where you take me. And so initially, prior to the trip, I was like, oh, I'm staying, I think I'm gonna go somewhere like blah, 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 blah. I didn't even know, to be honest. But I said, okay, Lord, well, I'm just going to do all these applications. I did like 30 of them all over the United States. Wow. Chicago, California, you name it, like everywhere. And so, and I got acceptances from a majority of them and all over. And it was my way of saying, okay, Lord, what do you want me to do? Where do you want me to go? And through that process of praying and just trying to surrender to the Lord, I really just kind of felt the Lord calling me to stay here, and I didn't know why. And there were a lot of things that helped me make that decision, such as, again, I'm blessed to be at school right now where I don't have to pay for anything. And that was just something that, the Lord was able to work out. And so I the finances worked out, the this worked out, blah, blah, blah worked out. And so there were so many signs that I felt the Lord just saying, okay, I think you're called to stay here. And so I made the school decision of staying here. And maybe a week afterwards, I get a call from Pastor Abe saying, hey, let's sit down. And we sat down, and he said, hey, how would you feel about coming on the student team and getting a chance to be the worship leader? And I never in my life expected that. I never in my life thought I would be deserving of that. I never in my life thought I was even ready for something like that. But Pastor Abe, Hector, Pastor Juan Carlos have all been big. Pastor Lucas have all been big people that have believed in me and saw something in me, even though I oftentimes don't even see it in myself. And just blessed to have been given the opportunity and whole and just undeserved blessing of being able to be here. And but I think that's my biggest yay God moment is making the decision of staying here for school because I have no idea where I would be. I have no idea where my life would be. I have absolutely no idea if it wouldn't have been for that. So
That's so good. Yay, God, for that. What are your goals for the future then?
to be decided, to be honest. Yeah. Unknown, in pause. I'm figuring it out. And I still don't know. Again, I set out to go to school for engineering. And now I get the privilege of being worship leader here and realizing that I have a wholehearted passion, not only for God, but also to make God known.
Yeah.
And specifically through worship. And so figuring out what the next steps look like post graduation. So I get to hopefully graduate this December of 2024 and just trusting the Lord on what comes next. I feel like a lot of people in my life have been encouraging me by saying a lot of the similar things, and that has been to wait for the Lord. Don't try to get ahead of the Lord. Hey, that door's coming. Hey, that opportunity's coming. Hey, that answer's coming. And it made me realize that I kept trying to rush. I kept trying to come up with a plan. I kept wanting to want an answer when I just needed to, in this season, be still and wait for the Lord to show up in the way that I know that He is. And so I don't know the answer. I don't know the next step yet, but I trust and know that God's got me and it's going to be okay.
Yeah. That's so good, Byron. Well, I hope you guys really enjoyed what Byron had to say and that maybe you felt similar to the shoes that he's been in or that he's in right now, and that you find a purpose and a calling into that to just surrender everything that you're going through, the college choices that you're having to make, the perfectionistic tendencies that you're dealing with, that you just surrender it all over to the Lord because, like Byron said, you are fearfully and wonderfully made.
And I think the thing that people often don't realize too is that that is also a form of worship. That worship itself also isn't restricted to the songs that we're singing, although it's a tool to help us highlight this grandeur and majesty of God. But our obedience, our surrender, our seeking of Him are also acts of worship that glorify Him and points us deeper to Him. And that's what I find so cool about worship. And I know that we have to wrap this up soon, but I read this book last year that also changed my perspective a lot on what worship was. And I wrote it down because it defined worship in the best way that I think I had ever heard it. And that was, worship is the inner stirring of the heart to treasure God above all treasures of the world, a valuing of God above anything that is valuable, a loving of God above anything that is lovely, a savoring of God above all else that is sweet, an admiring of God above everything else that is admirable, a fearing of God above all else that is fearful, a respecting of God above all else that is respectable, a prizing of God above all else that is precious. And it made me realize that oftentimes we don't always have this level of passion for God, and that we can exemplify who God is across everything that we do by simply like this book defined it, respecting who He is, fearing who He is, savoring who He is, valuing who He is, and we get a chance to do that with all of our actions, including our surrender and our obedience. So
that's good. I appreciate that, Byron. Well, if you guys feel like you have a heart for worship, then join the lab and join Byron's team or go audition for his team. And he can talk to you more about not just worship, but also tech and all the different production things that go on behind the scenes that you don't even think about, but are truly, truly a way to magnify the gifts that the Lord's given you. Well, I really appreciate you guys tuning into today's episode. Byron, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. We'll see you guys next time on The Studio.
Yeah.
Bye.